Welcome, everybody, to Broadcast Team Alpha, where we bring you cutting-edge conversation while exploring the quantum possibilities. And I almost explored the quantum possibilities tonight with Augie and our esteemed guest, Father Castle, from the other side, which is a whole different story. So I am very grateful to be here. And I have to tell you, my experience that happened over the past 2 weeks has made me so much more deeply intrigued into what Father does. And I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. If you have any questions, please put them in capital letters in the chat room so that I can see them. And if they happen to scroll past, go ahead and put them in again. And you guys know where to reach us, broadcastteamalpha.com. We do meet on Sundays for the Mastermind Connection, where we get together and we do something of a spiritual think tank where we visualize the beautiful things that we want to see in the world. And in a meditative state, we just go into the feeling of that. Some people call it meditation. Many of us call it prayer. Some people call it whatever they want to call it, but we do it, and quite miraculous things have evolved as a result of that. So you can send us an email right from our website, broadcastteamalpha.com, or the long way is send an email to the Mastermind Connection, all one word, at gmail.com, the Mastermind Connection at gmail.com. Augie, I'm so excited. Please tell us about Father.
This is going to be good because we have Nathan Castle with us. And he is, I think we should call him Father, or maybe just Nathan. But then again, I also see on his website that he is a friar. And I am not sure exactly of the title, what it means. So I'm going to stay on the safe side and use the two first ones. And he is an author, and for those of you that like to surf the internet while you listen, here is his website where you also can find his books, and that is nathan-castle.com. nathan-castle.com. And yes, he has written several books. It's a series of 3 of them that is called Afterlife Interrupted. You'll also find it on Amazon and probably a few other places. And I also saw on Amazon, he's got another book that we haven't talked about this, but it's En Toto 2. And there is a question that I'm going to ask later on. Does dogs go to heaven too? I'm going to ask that question later on, and maybe I can get some smiles out of that one. And yes, he is an author, a lecturer. He's a guest on shows and conferences everywhere. He's a Catholic father or priest, or maybe whatever you would like to call that. And because we are eternal spiritual beings, he has made his mission to help people who feel stuck, either on the earthly side or in the afterlife. Yes, and that is so they can experience freedom on both sides. Freedom is such a precious thing because most of us has never had it. Living under government, we don't have any. But there is freedom, and it comes through the mind and spirituality. And that's where I think we're going to go with a lot of this show. And he also helped people cross over. And also after they cross over, to find the way home. Because maybe some of us has figured it out already. This is not really our home here. We are spiritual beings first. So I've talked enough, and welcome to the show there, Father Nathan.
Welcome.
Great
Father.
to be with you. Thank you for having me.
It's so exciting to have you here. I mean, a lot of priests, take the usual trajectory and help people on this side of the veil. But it seems to be that your specialty is really helping them on the other side of the veil. And I find that so interesting for someone. I've been a hospice nurse and a burn trauma nurse. So I've been with so many people who have died that I often wondered, is there a gap? You know, do you get lost? Can you get stuck? What happens? So, before you tell me that part, when you were younger or in your family, did you see that this is where you were heading to where you'd be sitting here today telling us about this?
Well, I couldn't have predicted the internet or that I would have a podcast too. And there's a lot of things about my life that I didn't see coming. But I was raised in a Catholic home in Southeast Texas. I was born in 1956. I was I had the great good fortune of having parents and grandparents who lived next door, and aunt and both of my aunts were Dominican sisters who taught first grade. They belonged to the same order I belonged to. So I had lots of adult guidance. I went to Catholic school also and had a great experience of it. It wasn't just about rules and regulations, but they were teaching me a cosmology,
Mm.
an understanding of why I'm here, what's most important. I understood at very young age that I was both temporary and permanent in different ways at the same time.
Mhm.
And I learned about death, probably about 6 or 7, something like that. And that I was told that there were 3 destinations that seemed to me like nation states the way they described them. It sounded like you go to either Mexico, the US, or Canada. You know, you go to heaven, hell, or purgatory in some order. And it seemed to me that most people weren't perfect and most people weren't horrible, that it seemed like most people would be somewhere in between with an opportunity to continue to grow and heal or change, evolve. So that started for me at a very early age.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And in one of your last videos I listened to, um, people do find a place where you said in your video where they feel like they need to purge, where they need to become clean. And but that's not the Catholic purgatory that we're talking about. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up.
Let me first not bury the lead. The bulk of the ministry that my books are about is a phenomenon that began happening for me about 27 years ago. It was being contacted in a dream by someone who had died in a sudden and violent way. I give the example of being a priest for many years. I kept a pager on the nightstand at least one night a week. Very often priests in a region within a city will take a turn answering emergency calls at the hospital during the night. So when that happens, you have to suddenly rouse yourself and go from sleeping to alert and write down the patient's name, next of kin, room numbers, all these things, but maybe somebody a contact at the nurse's station. You did trauma nursing, didn't you?
Yes, I would be calling you.
Yeah. So the first time that it happened, in this, it felt that way, even though it was just a dream, but it was not a normal dream. It was a contact dream. Somebody was contacting me who had burned to death on the radiator of an old car from the 50s, the kind with fins and lots of chrome. And I knew in an instant that I was being contacted. And so I sat up and wrote down what I saw, said a prayer to the person, and promised that I would figure out how to help them. And that's how this all began all those years ago.
That's amazing. And how did you, what came next? How did you know how to help them? Like, how did that, what was the next step?
Well, you're an accomplished person. You probably have sometimes faced things that you weren't sure what to do about, but you just break the big problem down into smaller parts. Um, so I got with a partner. I was on a retreat. I got with a partner who I knew had spiritual gifts, who was on the same retreat. I was leading it, but when I go on a retreat, I like to be one of the first ones up in the morning. I like to have the first cup of coffee and a quiet moment before being around a lot of people. And she did the same. And so I just said, something's happened during the night. Someone has contacted me. Could we find a moment to go into prayer and discern what this is about? And she was a very gifted person that I thought would probably be able to help. And she did help. She said, we go into what I call protected prayer. I don't go into these spirit realms just wandering about. I'm a Catholic Christian, so I use St. Michael the Archangel. I use Mother Mary, St. Dominic, the founder of our order, a number of different Catholic Christian saints, just to make sure the space is secure. And once we did that, we sat in stillness for a bit. And she said, whoever this man is, he really wants to talk to you. Is it all right if I allow him to? Because she had the facility to do that. She had a spiritual gift that commonly gets called channeling. In the church, I prefer to use the word prophecy. Um, the Jewish prophets allowed God to speak through them in first person speech, and very often at a Catholic mass, the first reading is from one of the prophets. So anyway, she let him talk, and he explained. He was angry. The first words out of his mouth were, "Who the hell does he think he is, taking me just when my life was getting good?" Um, when we got a little deeper into the conversation, I learned that he died in 1960 when I was 4 years old. He was 21. He accidentally burned to death. But he had been taught that the reason people die is because God takes them. And so God was something of a body snatcher. So he didn't want any part of God because God had set him on fire. That idea.
Oh boy.
So then there's a big gap of time there, right?
There is. And I asked him about that. This happened in about the late 1990s, maybe 1998 or somewhere along in there. And I asked him, what have you been doing all these years? And he said, nothing much. He was from rural Georgia. I'm from Southeast Texas, and I can put on the accent easily enough. It's kind of native to me. Um, uh, we asked him, what is it that you want of us? How can we help you? And he said, my wife, she's an old woman now, and she's dying of cancer, and I want to greet her when she crosses, but I can't the way I am. So he died at 21. They had gotten pregnant their senior year of high school, married, and the child was a year and a half old. They were renting a small house with a detached garage where he had started an auto repair business with his best friend. And that's where he died, in that garage. So he explained that she had married again, married a lawyer, and moved to South Carolina. But now she's got cancer and she's dying, and I want to greet her, but I can't the way I am. So that was our task.
Oh my goodness, and that's beautiful. And then how does that transformation happen? Does it happen with prayer, or is there a prayer team, or how does
No, it's funny. I've done more than 600 of these, and his was the only one that took us several sessions because we were, finding our way along. And he needed immediate help. He isolated as thoroughly as he could when he died angry. And so he had not received any help in the afterlife because he was not open to it. What I've learned, again, I use Catholic language because it's what I know. And he spoke about his guard. He said, there's a guy who sits over there in the corner and doesn't talk. And I thought, well, that's your guardian angel. They don't go away. They stay with you as long as they're needed. And
Yeah.
and it turned out that we needed to get him circulating because he had isolated by himself. So I said, well, don't you think we need to, and I reminded him that cancer has its own schedule and we can't dawdle. I'm going to have to hurry you to help to serve you. And you're probably not going to like it because most people don't like being hurried. And I said, anytime you want to stop, we'll stop. But we worked our way through it over a period of about 3 weeks. I think 4 sessions total. And I just really, I got him to invite his father to come for him to go for a walk. Just so
Beautiful.
he could
Mm.
get up and moving, because I said, she's not gonna come to you in all likelihood. You're the one that's gonna have to get up and move. So why don't we get you moving? So he didn't know his dad very well. His dad died when Ray, the man's name was only 10 years old. He said, I was a little afraid of him and didn't know him that well. He died in the war. And I said, is Vietnam? He said, no, Korea. So I asked him after his dad came for him. I asked him how he knew about God at all. He was mad at God, and he said it was his mother who had him kneel next to the bed, and she beat him while he prayed. So I asked him, now, would you have beaten your son had you gotten to raise him to adulthood? Well, he said, of course not. Well, why did your mother do that? I don't know. She just did. So I
Yeah.
said, well, maybe you learned a little thing or two about God that wasn't exactly right from the mom who beat you while you prayed. But in the
Wow.
end,
Yeah.
that story is all told in the first of the Afterlife Interrupted books at great length. But
Yes.
in the end, I just said to him, you know what, you act like a caveman when you talk about her. Like if you had your way, you'd grab her by the hair when you see her and you'd pull her into your cave. I think you need to be more of a gentleman than that. You're probably not the only person who wants to greet her. She's in her 60s after all. There's probably lots of people that she's loved who have died and would like to greet her. So get yourself ready to be one of a small group and just be
Yeah.
a gentleman about it. And in the end, uh, the second to last time we talked to him, we said, how you doing, Ray? And he said, big news, my wife passed. I said, oh, well, tell us all about that. And he said, well, it was a little like you said. There were just a few of us, not too many, but I was there and I got to greet her, and you'd have been proud of me. I was a perfect gentleman.
Aw.
So
Wonderful.
that's all he needed to do, was sort of calm down a little bit.
I
And,
I love that so much. And Father, it gives so much life to all of the bedsides that I stood next to, and the
yes,
person reaching out to the invisible people we can't see, or
yes.
saying, this is my mother, I'd like you to meet her. Like, oh, I'm so happy to, very nice to meet you. Nobody's there. And so this gives such life to that. That's amazing.
Yes, that's often called a deathbed visitation. They're quite common. You probably saw lots of them.
Yeah.
My grandmother had one. I was with her in the last hours of her life, and she had one.
Mm.
What about when people let you know they're going right before they go? What's that called?
Well, one of the things well, terminal lucidity. If they've been unconscious and they come alert right near the end and let you know that they're going, that's usually called terminal lucidity. I had that with a 39-year-old policeman who was in a coma for the last several days of his life. And I was with him right at the very end. His wife had gone out to get a cup of coffee, and he sat up in the bed and said to someone other than me, no, not yet. I want to talk to my wife. So I got in his line of sight, and I was wearing a black collar, the Roman collar of a priest. And I said, you stay right there. I'll go get her. She's just out in the hall. And he died within 10 minutes, but not until he saw his wife.
I love that.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
And then do people like who are dying not wake up, but somehow telepathically let people know they're going, like maybe in a dream, like I dreamed Aunt Seal was gonna die and she did, something like
Uh,
that.
you must have read of a lot of grandchildren know that their grandparent died before they're informed of it.
Yeah, that
Often,
Yeah.
happened.
a
Yes.
grandparent will very often buzz through a child's bedroom and visit somehow, and then they'll wake up and learn that grandma died during the night. There's a lot of literature around that kind of thing.
I
Mm.
love, Father, I love the way that you use the word that they buzz through, because
Yeah.
my experience of it, it's happened a couple times, is like they buzz by. I
Well,
used to liken it to the Top Gun movie where they would buzz the tower. And I'd
oh yeah.
go, now who's leaving? Because they'd buzz by at night and I'd be, okay,
And
who's going?
they're energetic, and they're having to get used to controlling their new way of being. you know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We will all learn that one day, but it'll be something new, and it's something that we'll get used to as we experience it a bit.
Yeah.
But the people that I deal with almost all died violently and suddenly. And in the first book, the subtitle was Helping Stuck Souls Cross Over, because I thought that many of them seemed to be in, well, like Ray, having some thought pattern that kept them confined.
Yes.
And like,
What about Ray? After that, he got to see his wife. Do you know what happened to him? Did he go home, so to speak, or to the
yes,
light?
I know a little. I only know a little because, Augie, we never tell these stories publicly without going back one last time to get their permission. It just
Yeah.
seems that's the polite thing to do. It's their story after all. And we don't usually have identifying information about, last names and social security numbers and death certificates and
Yeah.
such. But I do go back and say, we maybe use your story in a book. And at the end of it, he told me that now that he knows how to greet people, because he did it with his wife, he thought, this is something I want to learn more about. And it's a consistent thing in my world that there's so much to learn that there are schools where other people want to know that too. And so you're brought into some sort of cohort or group of people who want to learn the same thing you do. And as a person who's been a lifelong student, I love learning, and I love being with people that want to know what I want to know. And so that's a delightful piece of what I've seen in that lowest level of afterlife activity is he wanted to know more about how to become more expert in greeting people.
Oh,
And
I love
so
Hey.
he went to a school to learn how to do that. In fact, I told him at the end, I said, you know what? I know these two things about you. I know that you can keep track of people because you watched your wife for 40 years. And I know that you can greet them when they pass. And so, Ray, would you mind watching me until I pass? And would you greet me when I do? And
that.
his last words to me were, why, sir, I'd be most honored. Just look for the
Oh,
perfect gentleman.
that is the
Wow.
sweetest thing,
Isn't it
Father.
a sweet story? Yeah.
That is wonderful.
It's
Yeah.
so
So
sweet.
whenever that day arrives, I expect to meet face to face with Ray, the perfect
Yeah.
gentleman.
Oh, goodness, I bet he'll have a little
Yeah.
too. Um, Father, when people are jettisoned out of their body traumatically, this is what I always worried as a nurse.
Yeah.
Did it hurt?
I'm glad you asked that, because I hear over and over again people say things like, I was in the car accident, my body flew through the windshield, but I wasn't in it at the time.
Okay.
Or you're a burn nurse, and I'd like to tell you the story of what I call Lucille Calm Under Fire. She died in one of those wildfires that go
Uh,
through a whole neighborhood. And she said, it's true that my body burned, but she was curious about the physics of wildfires running through a neighborhood. She said, when they get that hot and everything, all the trees are on fire, it feels like the sky is on fire. Can all the oxygen go away before the flames even get to you? And I said, well, that's a good question. You're just asking the wrong person. I don't know if that's the way they work or not. But she said, well, the reason I ask is because I died in a wildfire in my home, but I never smelled smoke, I never felt heat, and then it was never burned.
Mm.
Amazing.
She said my body burned later, as did everything in the house, but I wasn't in it at the time.
That's amazing.
Well, I can understand that why they wanted to leave, because burning is the worst way to go.
I would think so. She
Yeah.
was concerned. It was something like 3 in the morning, and she was awakened to beautiful dancing colors out her window that she had never seen before. And she just thought, this is spectacular. I wonder what this is. She went over to the window to discover she was in a wildfire. And she said, I
Mm.
was a widow. I was in my night clothes and slippers. I didn't like my chances on the driveway. If I'd been a younger woman, I might have grabbed the car keys and made a run for it. But she said, rather than run through the house and scare the cats, I gathered them up to me and I sat in a chair and said, let's just see how this goes. She
Oh,
had in mind that sometimes tornadoes or wildfires will skip
Yeah.
about and there'll be one house left standing while everything else around it is gone. And she just said, maybe that'll happen. And it did not. But she said, I would never have thought that dying in a wildfire in your own home could have been so easy.
And so amazing, Father, that she noticed the different colors and found the beauty of that moment. I mean, that's so amazing that we can actually do that.
Well, in the dream, she was showing me the standing at the window as though I was in her eyes. And then after registering that it was beautiful, there was something black and sinister coming up from the lower left and kind of claw-like. So it had both beauty and danger in it, the
Mm.
way she told the story. But in the
Mm.
end, she didn't need very much from us. And we found that they don't really need a lot of counsel like Ray did. Most of them have been vetted. They've been through a process. And maybe you're a part of that one day because you've been in healthcare. After you die, there's still people who need to be comforted. And
Mm.
some of them think they need healthcare. Um,
Ah,
for example, back during the pandemic and before there were the vaccinations, when it just seemed like your next breath could could kill you, all that masking and everything. Um, we dealt with a man who died suddenly, and the guy who greeted him was his uncle, no, it's his cousin Arturo, who was an emergency med tech. And he said, Earth is sending us way more people than it normally does because of this contagion. And he said,
Yeah.
some of the people who get it, who die of it, they get feverish and they go unconscious and they pass in their sleep. But others die gasping for their last breath. And as they leave the body, they keep gasping. And so the kindest thing that you can do for those is to give them oxygen, put a mask on them and let them know that we're here and we'll help you breathe. And then gradually you help them realize that they don't need this anymore. But for a little while, that was the best, kindest thing you could do
Yeah.
for them.
take the panic away. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell us the name of your books again, because I'm all ready to go to Amazon.
Well, the first one, they're all called Afterlife Interrupted. The first one I didn't know was going to be book one, but it became book one. It's called Helping Stuck Souls Cross Over. The second one, we kept the same branding and graphics, but we kept the phrase helping, but we crossed out the word stuck because we really felt like many of them weren't stuck. They were just in the most appropriate place that had everything they needed. And then this most recent one came out last December, and it's called Afterlife Interrupted. Please let me explain. Sometimes,
Mhm.
especially when we go back a second time and ask them permission to use their story, some people are just so eloquent. And oh, I think Lucille was the story woman I just was telling about. So there's three of them. They're all on Amazon, and they're either paper books, they're e-reader books, or they're Audible. And the audiobooks, I voiced them along with the prayer partners who actually took part in the session that we're describing, wherever that's
Mhm.
possible.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Okay. All right. I see now that we are down at the bottom of the hour here, and I want to remind you that joined us late in the show. We are talking with Nathan Castle. He has written several books, quite a few books, and one of them is a series that's Afterlife Interrupted. That's 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting conversation going on here. So stay with us on this one because you might just learn something. Before we started, I promised I was going to ask him a question,
Ah,
and that is, does dogs go to heaven too? Or what about animals?
Yes.
I know there are animal communicators, and there are people out there say that they can see animals. But what about in a spiritual sense? What do you know about that?
I would answer that in two ways. I'm a member of IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. We just had our international convention in Phoenix, just up the road from Tucson, where I live. There were
Yeah.
more than 800 of us there. And there were some animal communicators in a booth right next to mine where I was selling books. Um, in there are a lot of anecdotal evidence of people who had near-death experiences who came back into their body after being out of it for a time, who saw beloved pets while they were out of body. I have a friend named Jimmy Aiken, who in Catholic circles is very well known. He calls himself a Catholic apologist and paranormal investigator, and he's just brilliant. And I'm very educated in Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, and a lot of the Catholic Catechism is based on Thomas Aquinas. And Aquinas argued, Jimmy Akin would say that Aquinas would say, how's that? That it's an open question, that there's not a doctrinal definition in the Catholic Church as to yes or no about that. And St. Thomas muses that it could be possible. So I hold out hope that I will see beloved animals that I have loved. And I was taught in first grade, the nun that was teaching us in first grade asked that question of us, and she said, let's think this through, children. Isn't it true that heaven is that place where God provides everything we need to be completely happy? And we said, yes, sister. And she said, well, if you had a pet that you love very much that had died, and you felt like you needed to have them so that you would be completely happy, wouldn't that mean that God would have to provide it? Said, yes, sister. So she used to use a little logic with us, and so that's the way I hold out hope that I will be reunited with animals that I have loved.
Mhm. I'm right there with you. And so what about the Wizard of Oz?
Oh, I'm glad you asked.
I know the backstory, so I'm not going to spoil it, but
Can you
I
see on the wall behind me that picture with a dog in it?
mhm.
That's a blown up cover of that book, which is called An Toto to the Wizard of Oz as a Spiritual
All right.
Adventure. In fact, I'm going to be in Branson, Missouri, the week before Thanksgiving, giving a Wizard of Oz based retreat. You might know that the film Wicked is premiering on Thanksgiving, and it's getting there'll be a very large promotional budget in advance of it. So the Wizard of Oz will be back on people's minds because they're going to be reminded of this blockbuster film. So I'm going to be doing a retreat in Branson, Missouri, the week before Thanksgiving, based on the Wizard of Oz. Do you know the work of Joseph Campbell?
Yeah.
He worked for much of the 20th century on mythology, cultural anthropology, origin stories, epic hero stories. And his big contribution was what he called the monomyth. He felt like underneath all these huge stories that one finds all over the globe is this simpler story that's circular and that has about a dozen elements in it that keep recurring in all of these stories. And The Wizard of Oz is one such. It involves a protagonist who's called away from their normal life. Some unusual thing intervenes. In Dorothy's case, it's a tornado. She ends up over the rainbow. She had just wished that she could get out of Kansas, and a tornado accommodated her. In Campbell's idea, once you're in the new place where you can't go back the way you came, you meet up with allies and a nemesis. If it was on a clock face, you're now around 4 or 5, down towards 6 and 7. There's some sort of battle that could kill you and all your companions. You apparently win the battle, but then once you're exhausted, there's still one more thing you have to do. In the movie, they thought that all they needed to do was get to Emerald City and their troubles would be over. And they were celebrating when Oz says, there's just one more thing. Bring me that broomstick of the Wicked Witch. So then you're off again on yet another adventure. The thing I like about the Oz story is they never intend evil. They don't go there to kill her. They just go to get that broomstick because that's their ticket home, or to whatever it is their heart's desires. And they come back, and then, of course, they're given tokens that even a child can tell are not really a heart, and that's not really a diploma, and that's just a little badge. That's not really courage. And but then she realizes that she never really belonged in Oz to begin with, that she's a stranger in a strange land. She really belongs back where she began. And then in Campbell's thinking, the protagonist needs to cross back over the threshold and what he calls green the homeland. If you remember in the movie, Kansas was in black and white, in a very desolate looking black and white. And but she brings back the goods. Sometimes it's the sword and the stone, or it's the elixir of life. In this case, it's really herself.
Yeah.
It's not some trinket. It's herself that she brings home, but she's alive in her skin now and doesn't need to ever run away anywhere else because she's learned how to be in her own skin. So that's the short story of it. But I love that film and never get tired of doing retreats based on it.
I love
Yeah,
it too. Go ahead, Augie. I'm sorry.
I got another deep question for you, because I know for a long time the church have said there is no such thing as extraterrestrial beings. Now the Catholic Church is changing their way a little bit about that. Say, well, yeah, if God can create more than one place like Earth, there may be other things out there. And
Yes.
what is your take on the extraterrestrials, and may they be the same kind of spiritual beings as we are? Or what do you think?
Well, I already believed in God, who is both extraterrestrial and terrestrial, because I believe in Christmas, that God took flesh and human form, and that God is both human and divine because of the incarnation. I never suffered that in childhood. I was never taught um, that there were no other life forms besides us. In
Mm,
fact, we were taught
mm,
all about the angels, and the
yeah.
angels are non-material beings who are also persons. They're not human persons, they're angelic persons. We were taught that God has three personhoods. There are three persons in the one Trinitarian Godhead. So I was already taught a cosmology as a little kid that had animals, all kind of animal life, and human personhood, angelic personhood, divine personhood. And and I was growing up near Houston during the space race. So astronauts were all over the place around us. It was a big part of growing up in Southeast Texas. So the idea that we share the universe with other kinds of beings never conflicted with my religious training.
I love that. I
That's
love that.
good. Yeah,
That's
because
amazing.
obviously we do.
Well,
Yeah,
obvious to some and not as obvious to others, but it wouldn't I would I would chalk that up to God's enormous creativity. I don't know how anybody can live on this planet and not be amazed sometimes at the variety of life all around us.
yeah,
My sister and brother-in-law are underwater photographers, and they're always discovering uh, beings that are just so freakish and strange. And some of them, some of them can live inside a volcano, or they can live in battery acid or whatnot. It just seems like there's that life can adapt to all kind of
yeah.
circumstances that seem so forbidding. Um, anyway, I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah, and then we have near-death experiences. People die, they go there and they see wonderful things, and they come back and they talk about it. Once in a very, very great while, there is one that comes back and say, I saw the other place, the one downstairs in the
Yes.
basement next to the furnace.
Yeah.
What about, is that because of what they have done, or what they maybe their mind works, or what they believe, or what do you think?
Those are typically called a distressing near-death experience. And I think there's somewhere about 15% of near-death experiences
Yeah,
have that characteristic of them. In fact, I think Dorothy Gale in The Wizard of Oz had a near-death experience. If you remember, she was hit in the head with debris during that tornado. She dropped onto the bed, and then at the end of the movie, she's in the bed, and Uncle Henry is saying, "We thought for a minute there we were going to lose her." You know, she was unconscious and then traveled out of body and had all these other experiences. I don't know. I just listened to some talks on that last week. One of the ideas is that in the afterlife there can be a place that's hellish. It doesn't necessarily have to be a torture chamber that God created to put enemies, but it can be that people continue to choose to behave in ways that are destructive. Um, I I never go into spirit communication without first making sure I'm in good company. I believe that everyone is well made, but not everyone is well behaved. And so
Right.
not everyone is good company. And so I do believe that there can be afterlife places where people could observe dark things. But that doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean that it's a fiery pit of hell from which there's no
Yeah.
turning back.
I don't necessarily think that it's because of what they have done in the past, because I know a guy here in Tucson. He was a sniper for the US Army in Vietnam,
Yes.
and he had something like 18 or 19 confirmed kills. He shot
Yes.
somebody, didn't know anything about them. He was
Yes.
ordered to. He came back and
Right.
he knew he was going to go to hell when he died. And then
Yeah.
he had a near-death experience and he never saw that. He saw wonderful things.
I'm glad to hear that. I worked with the military for a time on what's called moral injury. Are you familiar with that phrase? Moral injury? In the it was explained to me by Dr. Bill Nash, who used to be in charge of healthcare for the Marine Corps, a psychiatrist. He explained to me that people use the phrase PTSD very casually. But to get the diagnosis, it can only be given officially by a psychiatrist, and that psychiatrist has to observe 5 behaviors. And they need to put a check next to each of the 5. And once that's done, that soldier can get the protocols within the VA that are appropriate. But he said a lot of people have 2, 3, or 4 of those things that are enough to disturb them quite a lot and make their marriages hard and their normal living hard, but it doesn't raise to the level of PTSD. So in 2007, he was one of a team of people that came up with the phrase moral injury. The argument being that there's just something in the human person that knows killing another person isn't a good thing to do. There might be circumstances like your sniper where it was legal and even trained for and so on, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't injure the person having to do that. And
Yeah.
so sometimes folk like that really need good care afterwards.
People do need good care. And even I've worked with nurses who would not administer morphine because of their religious beliefs. They would not do it.
Wow.
And yeah, it was very interesting.
But morphine will help them shut down the breathing and
yeah, I mean, it does really good things. You know, it makes you feel like you're not in pain. It makes you feel like you can take a deep breath, but you really can't. You're going in the opposite direction, you know. Feels good going the other way though. Yeah.
Well, what I've seen, all the people that I deal with in this particular ministry, almost all of them died suddenly and violently of something. Now, once in a while, I get people that suffered a kind of a soul-crushing trauma years before their death from which they never really recovered. You
Wow.
probably know at least one person who's been through some trauma and it just left them a shell of what they used to be. And
Yes.
sometimes people die that way. And what I've seen is when that happens, there are something on the order of afterlife clinics that are perfectly equipped. Don't you wish that every town everywhere had great mental health care that was affordable for everybody, that nobody was homeless because they were mentally ill, and that all of it was free? I've seen that. And people, one guy was from, I think, Colombia or Peru, and he was a peasant. He was a poor man, and he died, and he awoke into such a place. And he said, the sheets are clean, the food is good, and it's hot, and it's plentiful. And there's good care. He thought he must have died and gotten rich.
Aww.
Because he was being cared for in a way that only the rich in his experience would have been.
Maybe he did.
Well, I suppose so. He was getting what he needed. And that's what I've seen is that regardless of how awful a person's end of life might have been, they get what they need according to their own mode. Uh, Sometimes people will die in an event. For example, imagine causing a traffic accident that killed you and other innocent people, and now it's your fault.
Yeah.
Bad enough that you left the body in a car crash, but you caused other people too. So sometimes people will have a kind of a shame, a guilt
Yeah.
load that goes with them, and they ought not be talked out of that. In grief support, we don't just tell people, stop your crying, or he's in a better place. We let people move through their process, whatever it needs to be. And I've seen people just get what they need, and patient people like you might be on the team helping them, maybe prodding them a little bit so that they don't. Sometimes
Mm.
people can get in their own way, be their own worst
Yeah.
enemy, and
Yeah.
their guardian
Well,
angel will say, if you persist in believing what's not true, I won't be very helpful to you. And
yeah.
what you're saying is only partly true. Do you remember this part? And the guardian angel can fill in without insulting you, can say, yes, I've heard you tell that story, Nori, but do you remember this part? Because they were there and they saw something else. And oftentimes that helps a person calm down and maybe recast their story a bit and shift in a
Yeah.
way that's healing.
Yes, I loved when I worked night shift, because then I could tune in, and I would pray during my shifts, and I would get directions,
Yes.
like a nudge in the rib, say this,
Yes.
use
I've done
your
that for years in pastoral counseling. Sometimes people will seek out pastoral counselors. For one thing, we're a lot cheaper than the other kind. You can go to your pastor and make an appointment, and it might not cost you anything at all. It usually didn't. But sometimes people would come to you in pain and then talk about everything except what was important. They
yeah,
beat all around the bush. And um, once in a while, I would just pray to their guardian and say, your loved one is in pain, and she can't tell me where it hurts. Like maybe
yes,
like being a pediatrician or a veterinarian, when the patient
yeah,
really can't tell you as much information as you wish they could.
Yeah.
And once in a while, I would get a nudge that would say, ask her about junior high.
yes,
They won't disclose your secret, but that doesn't mean they can't point you in a direction. And
that's
sometimes I would say, tell me about junior high, and then the tears would flow. And it turns out that's when the abuse began, or,
Yeah.
whatever it
amazing.
was.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad that I followed those nudges, because I mean, all of my patients were, intubated and sedated, but I still spoke to them. And Father, I wondered about those people who were left to be a shell of a being, because I was in the trauma unit right at the time when the knife and gun club, they weren't killing people, they were getting expert at turning people into paraplegics. So we had a lot of them. And I often wondered, what is going on inside? What do you need? What could you possibly, what could we possibly give to you that could ease, some of this, whatever torment you may be going through?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of mystery in there. And I don't, you're being kind to me. You're inviting me on a show and broadcasting that I'm an expert in something. But it's a peephole. I haven't been given a guided tour of the universe. I just have a little station that I work at with my prayer partners, and I can tell you about that, which is what I do in my books.
And it began with love, because you wanted to love. Is that
It
correct?
begins and ends with love. That's all there is. God is
Yeah.
love, and everything that God created is love. And I just believe we're swimming in it all the time. I wish people knew that. That's that's why I do what I do. I try to help people understand that whatever the external things are that seem so upsetting, remember that you're loved.
Yeah.
So
You mentioned the word, what is or who is God anyway?
Well, one of the ways I just came from IONS, where 800 people were in a hotel, and people have all kind of ways in which they refer to that. Some just say the divine, others say source. Um, I go to creator a lot because it just makes sense to me to think of oneself as a created being in the universe. There's nothing about me that to me seems like it just leapt into existence all on its own. I think that I was designed and built by somebody that had the
A
capacity
little
to
smarter than
very
us, that's for
intelligent,
sure.
and I believe very loving, and I believe
Yeah.
I'm made of the stuff of God, and so are you, and that we all belong to each other. Again, I follow Jesus, and he used one of his dying breaths to say, "Father, forgive them all. They don't know what they're doing." Nobody apologized for nailing him to a cross. He just forgave them all. And I try to live that way and not make distinctions between one kind and another. But there are prudential judgments that you have to use. I don't pick up hitchhikers, and I'm glad that there are police and laws and so on. But on the other hand, I believe I can still try to love everyone all the time. That's our job. That's
I
what I
got one
think.
more question, and that is someone here heard you were going to be on, and they asked me, ask him, what is your take on speaking in tongues?
Oh, well, it's called glossolalia, and I first observed it and spoke in tongues when I was about 20. My experience of it is it's a way of expressing joy that's beyond words. You know,
Mhm.
verklempt is another word that's kind of like that, where you just get choked up and you're so full of emotion, uh, logic fails, and very often speaking in tongues, when you do it in a group, it's usually moving out of a prayer of gratitude and praise and thanksgiving, and then very often the prayer leader might be playing a guitar, and they'll do a few strums that sort of is a cue to people that, it's kind of the way they flash lights at a theater to tell you to go sit down. It's time to, they'll do a little strumming saying, if you feel moved to move into tongue speaking, go ahead. And then it moves through the room and it has a lovely flow about it. You know how on a musical score the notes go up and down. You can almost feel that moving through a room, the undulation of tongue speaking and it usually has a kind of melodic character to it. It
Yeah.
usually isn't about content. It's not messages that are encoded. It's just joy being expressed with verbalizations.
And then someone has to be there to interpret.
That's a
Most
different
likely.
kind. That's a different kind of tongue. That kind. There can be somebody delivering, that's prophetic speech. Somebody
Oh,
delivers something, and it might be in a human language that the person doesn't speak, or an ancient language, and then the way I was taught, you'll know it's authentic if someone else in the room simultaneously understood it and gives voice to it. So it's a collaboration of a couple of people in a prayer meeting.
yeah.
Mhm. What about all of your work is the most important thing that you would like for the whole world to know if the whole world was listening?
You're loved every minute of your existence. You're loved right this minute. You're never alone, and you'll always be. There. And sometimes people that are having a very hard life and might have suicidal ideation, they don't want to hear that I'll always be. It's too painful for me to even imagine. Well, I would just say that it gets better, and you're always loved. And if you're feeling that way, please seek somebody out who might be able to lift you somehow or help you out. But I really want people to know that death doesn't define us. It's a moment like being born, and it'll happen, and then you'll go on. And I believe there are a great many other joys and great experiences to have afterwards, regardless of whether you're a religious person or not.
Mhm.
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 It's
Mhm.
not just the good
Yeah.
boys and girls that survive their death. It's everybody else. Everybody.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's why I keep saying there is no such thing as death. There's
It's a
only,
moment. It
yeah.
it occurs, but I don't let people say he talks to the dead.
Mm.
There really aren't any dead. I talk to people who have died, but there's still people who are alert. They're just alert
Yeah.
in a different wavelength and a different mode of being.
Would you call that like in a transitioning? Are they in a transitioning moment?
Well, sure. I mean, you did nursing. You must have seen people born. That's a big transition.
Uh-huh.
And dying is an analogous one, but but it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Dying, there comes a point where you're finished dying. You've died. You can just go to the past tense and say she died. And then after that, you're living in another manner of being. It isn't always an instant. Even when it comes time for people to record a patient's time of death, that can be tricky depending upon heartbeat or brainwave or different ways in which that might be measured.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And just like the birth, though, I have to say, and I'm wondering how you feel about it, every single last breath that I've witnessed, I've taken pause as it being such a special moment, just like birth. There's just something about it that is so precious and so Father, I don't even have the word. I don't even have the word. It's just that special and amazing and magical, even. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I wish everybody had that experience so they could see for themselves that it can be quite a beautiful thing. I've experienced several people's moment of passing, including my grandfather's, and um, it can. A lot of people will tell you that it was one of the most amazing or heartfelt things they ever took part in.
I consider that moment to be more or less a graduation from this school, so we can go on to the next one and learn more.
Yes. Yeah. I used to have a friend that called it getting promoted.
Yeah.
You
There
got
we go.
Augie's
Promoted.
Augie's gonna go to the doghouse. Father,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being with us. Please tell us one more time how to reach you for all of the people that are asking questions here.
Sure. That's my website is nathan-castle.com. If you go to the website, there's a contact form, and I ask, I like to have, I know, first thing I asked you is where are you today? And I like to know, for example, what time zone are people in, because I like to text them if they'll leave a phone number. I'd prefer to text and maybe make a brief phone call rather than writing a lot of email. And I ask that if people have questions that are related to the work that I do, would you please read one book before you contact me? Because very often the questions that they asked are answered in the books. And I try to say, I think we'll have a richer conversation if you're a little better informed about it. So if you would please take the time. Very often they're asking about a loved one. Suicides, my child committed suicide or died by drug abuse, or very often it's because of people's own suffering that they're not always asking questions just out of intellectual curiosity. Very often it's moving through their heart. But I'm happy to try to reply as promptly as I can. Just
Yeah.
email me through the website.
It was such an honor and pleasure to
Yeah,
spend
gosh.
time with you. Thank you so
Well, you're
much.
doing great work. I appreciate the effort that you put into doing all of
Thank you.
this.
Thank you so much. We have to have you on
Yeah.
again in the not too distant future. One quick question. Do you visit or what do you think about the Akashic records?
I'm interested. I don't have any direct experience of it at all, but because I'm a member of IONS, I'm around so many people with such varied interests, and I know about that. And of course that comes from the Eastern traditions. But
Yeah.
I was also taught, again as a little Catholic child, that everything that we bring into being, including our speech and our actions, goes on. That uh,
Yeah. Recorded.
yes, and in the near-death literature and the experiences that people have brought back, the life review, Are you familiar with the life review? We're kind of
Yeah.
getting into that topic all the way. Maybe we talk about that the next time you have me on if you want
I'd
to.
love to do, yes.
Although there, I would tell you in an instant there, you could get experts on that, and I'd rather be in the audience or on a panel than talking about it because I'm not that skilled in it. But a lot of people talk about being brought into a circumstance where they are floating in love, and then they're shown scenes from their life, maybe from junior high, where they said something unkind that had a wounding effect that followed a person, or conversely, that they did something encouraging or something that lifted someone up that changed that person's life. And they're allowed to see how that's been kind of the theme of a number of different movies over the years,
Yeah.
including It's a Wonderful Life. You know,
Yeah.
how something that we did reverberated down through time and space and affected lots of people. And, you know, I think that's a good way to kind of try to approximate the Akashic record.
Understood. Beautiful.
I think so.
Father, thank you so much. We're over time, and we'll have to have you on
Okay.
again in the very near future.
All right. You know how to reach me. I'd be
Yeah.
honored to be.
Yeah.
Thanks,
That would
guys.
be,
Here, really good chat. I'm gonna go back in and look and see what we missed. I'm sorry. The conversation was so good, guys. I couldn't break away. Mac, thank you tonight. Augie, always good seeing you. We'll see you next
Yeah.
week, guys. Thank
All right.
you.
Bye, everybody. God bless you.
I got one 20-second question I would still love to ask you, and that is that if you could talk to the whole world and the world is listening, what would you tell them?
You're absolutely loved every instant of every moment of your existence. You always are, even if it doesn't feel that way. And you're never alone. You're always part of the one.
Perfect. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you.
Good
All
night,
right.
everybody.